Well, hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Super Jesus Jackson channel. I'm back at it again with yet another video. This time we're talking AI once again. James Cameron, one of the greatest filmmakers of all time, a true auteur. The guy's got two of the highest grossing movies in the history of cinema under his belt, okay? Avatar and Titanic, of course. He's iconic, okay? Incredibly iconic. I love his movies. A lot of people have been crapping on his recent movies, especially Avatar. And, you know, a lot of people are like, God, the fact that James Cameron is focusing on Avatar, you know, he's doing another 3 or 4 movies or whatever instead of, you know, other original ideas is kind of disappointing. And I can agree to a certain point, but to a certain extent, but I loved Avatar: Way of Water. I thought it was a phenomenal sequel that justified its existence, and it made me cry like a goddamn baby at the theater. Yeah, that's right, I said it. And I love the first Avatar, okay? Screw everyone else who said who say they don't like it. They're wrong. Well, it's all subjective, yes, but they're still wrong. The guy is he's made a lot of comments on AI, and I wanted to comment on one of his recent comments. He was on this podcast, I don't know which one, but he essentially makes a case for AI. I mean, is he making a case on AI? I don't think so, but he's expressing a philosophical point of view that a lot of people have not thought about. I have. In fact, after we watch this video and then we talk about it, you know, or at some point I'm going to show you a clip of times where I've talked about AI and I've expressed this same philosophical perspective. It's a perspective that I think people just don't think about when it's glaringly right in front of them. And I think it philosophically changes the conversation around AI in general. I mean, now, of course, AI right now in this context, we're talking about it from an artistic standpoint. So there's that. But, you know, am I making this video to completely show off, you know, that look, everyone, I said it before James Cameron. Yes. Do you care? Will everyone care in the world? Does anyone care? No, probably not. But I'm doing it for my own sake because 30, 40 years from now, whatever happens to me, I want to watch this video. And I'm be proud of myself for making the video and telling people, look, I said it first. But it doesn't matter. I'm not James Cameron. James Cameron is James Cameron, and when he says it, everyone's going to notice it. Hell, Elon Musk even noticed it. That is how, I guess that's how much this circulated, which is crazy. You know, it's kind of like that thing where like you're in class and you know, you have the answer to the question or something, or you have an idea and you raise your hand, and then like some other kid gets called first for whatever reason. And he says the same exact idea you had, or he says the answer before you or whatever. And then you're just like, God, I had that first. I had it first. You know what I mean? Like, it's kind of like that, or, you know, just like, I had that too, you know, at least. So it's kind of like that. But it doesn't matter. No one cares who I am. You know, I care about James Cameron. I love James Cameron. So there's that. But I still got to get it in. Anyways, let's react to this and then listen to it. Yep. And then talk about it.
The thing that I've been thinking about lately, because a lot of the hesitation in Hollywood and entertainment in general are issues of you know, the source material for the training data and who deserves what and copyright protection and all that sort of thing. And I think people are looking at it all wrong. Personally, I think we are all. I'm an artist. Anybody that's an artist, anybody that's a human being, is a model. You're a model already.
Yeah.
You know, you got a 3.5 pound meat computer. You're not carrying all the training data with you. You're creating a model as you go through life to process quickly through that model every new situation that comes on. And as a screenwriter, you have a kind of built-in ethical filter that says, I know my sources. I know what I liked. I know what I'm emulating. I also know that I have to move it far enough away that it's my own independent creation.
Right.
So I think the whole thing needs to be managed from a legal perspective as at what's the output,
Yeah, that's
not
right.
what's the input. The input, you can't control my input.
Yep.
You know, you can't tell me what to view and what to see and where to go. My input is whatever I choose it to be and whatever has accumulated throughout my life. You know, my output,
That's right.
the script I write should be judged on whether it's too close, too plagiaristic, whatever.
There it is. There it is right there. Look, AI is a nascent technology while at the same time not being. It's been around forever in many ways. We think of autocorrect. That's a form of AI. You know what I mean? Like, is that, like autofill? Should we remove that? I mean, that's AI, right? And to a certain extent, Siri has been on with us for a while. Hey, Google, right? Hey, Alexa, whatever, like to a certain extent, that is a form of AI, right? So, there's levels to this. And then, I've made the argument further in a different way, but I'm not going to get into that right now. But because there's a lot of hypocrisy with this stuff, okay, with a lot of these anti-AI people. Look, the main thing that James Cameron here talks about is you should criticize the output, not the input. In regards to a lot of people, and a lot of you have seen this, Studio Ghibli or Ghibli. I'm not sure. I think it's Studio Ghibli. They're the works of Miyazaki. I believe that's his name. He's the guy behind the Studio Ghibli movies and the way they look and stuff like that. They're iconic films. And the art style is very iconic. And recently, ChatGPT, its image creation tool, has allowed people to create Ghibli style, pretty damn close Ghibli style images. Now, this isn't anything new. I mean, Midjourney was able to do this, I believe. I mean, you could go into Midjourney, and be like, give me an image that's similar to Van Gogh or Michelangelo or whatever. You know what I mean? And it would be able to do it, I'm sure. For some reason, but ChatGPT is more used than Midjourney, so there's that. And so a lot of people started just, inputting a bunch of images of real life events and then making it into Ghibli style. And just people are just going ham with all kinds of images and videos and making them Ghibli style. And it's pretty damn close. And, a lot of people have come out, against it, being like, this is a violation. This is awful. The fact that, these AI platforms like, OpenAI and stuff like that, and even Google, right, are absorbing all this data. They're getting all this data that exists out there, of copyrighted work, i.e. Ghibli's work or Ghibli's movies and Miyazaki's, artwork and stuff like that. And they're using it to create, ChatGPT and everything. They're using it to create these images, right? And so that's the number. That's number one. That's crime number one. Is the fact that all of these things are being gathered without the consent of the original artists, right? So that's it. And then, of course, they also have, ill with the creation of it, the distribution of it, the sharing of it even. Obviously, not the selling. I mean, I'm sure some people are selling this already, but that's almost kind of a separate argument. But at the very least, what James Cameron is talking about is the input, is the gathering of this data. Why are we going to give so much crap to the way that this is gathered, to the way that this training data is gathered, when we humans do the same exact thing? Now I'm going to show you a clip of me talking about this exact same thing and talking about this very same almost philosophical perspective to view the input of AI, where, the way that AI works is the way humans work. And so because of that, I think we need to be a little bit more sympathetic to AI. So the fact that AI is plagiarizing, is essentially stealing from real people, real artists, and then sort of creating an original piece of art from that. How do I say this? Every musician in this entire world does that exact same thing. What I'm doing right now, I am watching Rick Beato's video, and then I am reacting to it, recording myself, creating another video, using his content in a way to fuel my content. It sparks some thoughts, and then I make a video about it. Art overlaps, right? And is that a bad thing? No, it's not. Nirvana wouldn't be Nirvana without the Beatles. Michael Jackson wouldn't be Michael Jackson without James Brown. Is that the same process that an AI would use to create original music, to create art? 100%. So there we have it. I maybe it's 100% in context, maybe it's not, but I think you get the point. I think, James Cameron is right here. When we're addressing the input, I think the problem is not the fact that these things are gathering the data, because there's so many, look, even ads, even the ads that appear on your YouTube page, on Google, on websites that you visit, everything is tailored to your liking. The ads that you see, it's not a surprise that all of a sudden you were looking at Hot Topic once, on some day, and then all of a sudden you're seeing a Hot Topic ad in another page, that you visit. It's not a goddamn coincidence, and granted, all of this was with your consent, while let's not, kind of beat around the bush here. You really have to consent to that in order to use even these websites in Google and YouTube the way you need to. You know what I mean? Like, if you don't consent to this, I'm not sure if you can use it or not. To my estimation, I don't think you can, at least not to the degree that we do. So it's kind of just like, it's highway robbery in that sense, and that's probably not the right metaphor, but you know what I mean, like, or figurative, whatever the fuck. You know what I mean? Where it's just like, we don't really have a choice. So that stuff is happening, okay? The gathering of data is happening. The government has your information. The government has everything, okay? Like let's not, pretend, you know what I mean? Like we're already here, you know what I mean? Like, so there's that. Now, not just because that is the case doesn't mean that it's okay, and I'm not saying neither here nor there. I'm just saying that that's happening. So why aren't we raising a ruckus about that? You know what I mean? Well, we don't, because it just is what it is, right? We've grown accustomed to it, and for other reasons I'm sure that I can't think of right now. But yes, so there's that. But more importantly, it's not the input of it, and I get the fact that these people are saying, look, the input is a problem because the output will be a problem. You know what I mean? Like, the input is a problem because the fact that these platforms are stealing, quote unquote, from other artists, and just from a plethora of sources to gather and create this output, of a prompt from someone being like, hey, give me a Star Wars image, with Studio Ghibli style, like, boom. The fact that output is a problem. We don't want that. We don't want AI. In fact, the whole argument is we don't want AI creating, images that resemble the works of other creators. There's that, but also in general, we don't want AI art to begin with. These people are criticizing anything that is created by AI, anything artistic. And so, they're like, I think probably at the end of the day, the argument, and I've said this before as well, the core of this of the anti-AI argument is being anti-AI. That period. Being anti-machine. That is literally what it is. Now, some of these people will say, well, I want AI to do my dishes. I don't want them to replace the artists that I love, and that's a very, very fair point. I really do think that we should first take care of that before we start doing, art. But I feel that to be the case about 60%, at least. However, I think that the input by itself, if we were just going to attack that part of the AI argument, is not the problem. Because we would be hypocrites. And then people are going to say, well, who cares that we're being hypocritical against a machine, against technology? Well, and then this is where, I bring in probably the most controversial part of my argument, which is that I think at some point, 100 years from now, 10,000 years from now, whatever, at some point, AI will be the next civil rights issue. Because there's going to be androids, there's going to be AI that eventually will develop consciousness. And once it does, we have to start thinking about the way that we treat it. Not just for Terminator reasons, not just for Skynet reasons, but just for plain old, for the reasons that we decided to reconsider, how we treat minorities, how we treat people of other races, other genders, other whatever. Just because it's the right thing to do, right? Because that's how we view it. And so I really do. Now that's an issue that is going to be for, the future, but we now have the hindsight, to see how badly things go if we mistreat people. If we don't get our shit together, we see what the ramifications are of that. So if we can, sort of learn from that and then not eventually, because AI, I'm calling it right now, AI will develop consciousness at some point. That will happen. You know what I mean? That is going to happen. And when that happens, we better be prepared to treat it right. Not just because it's the right thing to do, right? Because at the end of the day, and this is, now I'm going into this whole other philosophical thing, but at the end of the day, we all do what we do because we are so anthropomorphic. Like everything is, androids are based off of the human image, the human experience. And the only reason we sympathize with it, the only reason you could argue that we even sympathize with animals is because we are human beings and we understand what experience is, what consciousness is. And we're almost so egotistical that we place that burden of consciousness, that burden of suffering on animals. And we think that they feel suffering. We think that they have consciousness. And so therefore, we want to treat them right. Or at the very least, we're like, well, if it did have consciousness, gosh, it would be pretty shitty for me to treat it the way that I'm treating it. And I know how it feels to be treated like this. So I'm not going to treat it like that. You know what I mean? Like it's all very egocentric, like it's why the idea of religion and God is basically, it's an affirmation of itself. God created us in his own image. No shit. You know what I mean? Because it's all a cycle. Now I'm veering off into other things. I don't even know where I was going. But yes, the input. The input is not a problem. Because at the end of the day, the process in which AI operates, the way it operates, that is similar to human beings, is identical to human beings. Because we are influenced by so many things. Okay, we are products, hell, even genetically, biologically, we are biological models. The way that I look is a product of the way that my parents looked. And then the way they look is a product of the previous people, like their parents, and so on and so forth. We are not original. And I think this goes, again, dude, this is very like, it's very, very tribal. It's very, very like, what's the word, man? It's not, tribal's not the exact word that I'm thinking of. It's, at the end of the day, it's a very, it's just a deep-rooted problem in humanity, and that's the insecurity of humanity. Every single issue, every single debate that we have comes from the insecurity of humanity. I'll give you an example, right? When Copernicus said that we, in fact, are not the center of the universe, that the sun is actually the thing that's the center of our galaxy, of our universe. And religious people at the time and common thought at the time was that the earth was the center of the universe, that human beings were the center, because it's all about us, right? It's all about us. And then when Copernicus was like, no, I think it's actually the sun that is the center. Something else that we can't relate, something else that is nature that is not even us. It was an affront to humanity's ego, to the insecurity of humanity. And, and it was fought or whatever, but eventually now we've been like, yeah, we get it. The sun is the center. But it took time to get there. And so right now with the inception of AI, you could say that the inception of AI and the way that it's working and its process is a metaphor to just natural evolution of technology. In the same way that Copernicus's thought and his discovery is an evolution of human thought, is an evolution of human, scientific discovery. And then it took time for people to understand that and to process that, and then look at where we are now. And so, hell, autotune in music. People hated autotune. Now it's everywhere, even in music where you think it's not. You know what I mean? And it's fine, And so the same thing is happening. And so we feel AI has come into the fray. It is starting to open its wings, and people are being like, oh, no, this means we're not the center of the universe anymore. AI is the center now. You know, and no, this is a problem. But it's not. It's not. This is just an evolution of the way things are happening, evolving, you know? And we can grow with it. We can use it as a tool. You know, we don't have to take offense to it, you know? Again, I'm talking about the process. I'm talking about the tool. I'm talking about the input. You know what I mean? Because, again, we are influenced by everything, you know? In everything. You know, we're biological models, and we're also just mental models. You know what I mean? Everything that I do, there are people do reactions on YouTube because it's likely that they saw reactions from other people. And they're like, you know what, that was a good idea, so I'll do that. You know, people do things because other people do those things. You know, I love music because I listened to previous artists, you know, whose music I ended up enjoying, you know, and then I made my own music that was influenced by those artists, you know, and like James Cameron said, I tried to make it original, you know, of course. And that's the beauty of humanity, right, is that no matter how influenced we are by external factors, no matter how much Quentin Tarantino is influenced by Clint Eastwood, at the end of the day, his films are still original, even though you could see Clint Eastwood all over his films. And we can see Stanley Kubrick and the way that he filmed in so many goddamn films. In fact, James Cameron himself, Avatar, so many people have issue with that film because it's basically Dances with Wolves in space or in another planet. And it sort of is, but it's also not. And you know what? I am willing to go further. If it is pretty close, or as close as you could possibly get it without it basically infringing on copyright, I'm happy with that. Let's do that. That's awesome. I don't care. You know what I mean? I don't care. It's the same thing that happens with Ed Sheeran and the shit that he got and the lawsuit that he got over his song sounding similar to Marvin Gaye's song. Oh my God! If I were to tell you how many other songs, and this is a video that he was being interviewed by Howard Stern, and he was playing the chord progression of his song, you know, basically showing, look how many other songs sound like this song, you know. This Marvin Gaye song has the same chord progression that my song has, but so many other songs have. But those songs are not as popular as my song. You know what I mean? Like, and so I don't care. Like, honestly, dude, I think we need to be more relaxed when it comes to, you know, copyright and when it comes to plagiarism, because music is a language, film is a language, artistry is a language. You know what I mean? Like, art is a language. You know, language is language. Are we going to copyright, you know, words? You know, hell, I mean, look at when I talked about reactions, you know, when the React channel or whatever tried to literally copyright the reaction format, and so many people shit on them. But, you know, to go back, again, I've digressed so many goddamn times. The input is not the problem, right? I don't think so. Now, the output, right? And this is where James Cameron still presents a very rational point of view on the output. And he says, well, the input's not the problem. The output is make sure that that's not plagiarism, that's original, right? And so with that being said, you know, I can totally understand, you know, these Ghibli images, these Studio Ghibli AI images. You know, could you make the argument that these pictures, you know, should not exist because they're way too goddamn close to the works of Studio Ghibli? I think you can make a very, very good argument for that. I 100% think so, because it's eerily similar. You know what I mean? It truly is. But at the same time, you know, there's so many things, like I mentioned before, so many examples where there are original works today that are way too goddamn eerily similar to other things that exist, and they just fly by, you know, because, oh, a human created it, so it's fine. Now, then you can make the argument, well, it depends on the levels, you know, in the level in which, how much you're doing that, right? how much you're doing that eerily similarness. You know what I mean? How much you're plagiarizing, how much you're using. And I'm using plagiarizing not in the actual, not in the actual, plagiarism, like just lightly, just to make my point across. I think you can make the argument, right? You know what I mean? Like if you were to go to AI and be like, make me a Zack Snyder, style movie, right? And then it literally was like, you could look at it and be like, this is a goddamn Zack Snyder movie. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, I think there's a certain level to where like, why would you want to do that, right? Now, here's the thing. I think that those types of works I think at the very least, and I could change my mind, at least right now, the way that I'm thinking, I think works that are way too goddamn similar to their original creation, to the original artists, or to whatever, like these Ghibli images, or if you were to say to AI, give me a James Cameron film, and you look at it and you're like, God damn it, I can't see any other director making that movie. I think you can make the argument that, something like that should not be commercialized. But at the same time, like, if people are willing to pay for it, I mean, hey, I mean, why not? But then you get into the weeds of the original creators suing, and then that goes into the whole bag of, a whole bag of worms, can of worms. God damn it. But I can, I'm not saying 100% sure, you know what I mean? But like, I could see the argument for people being like, that work that is way too goddamn close to the original work should not be commercialized. You know what I mean? It could be done for fun, you know what I mean? But like, you shouldn't be able to commercialize it. You shouldn't be able to sell it. But, I can also see the argument to where like, yeah, but like, what if there's, what if, it's like the argument that some, in the music world, where like the idea of like, where the idea of copywriting an artist's voice, and likeness, and when an AI song creates that likeness and that voice, not only can that record label sue that AI work, but there's also the possibility that they could monetize it. They could charge you, you know what I mean? Like 80% of the revenue that AI work gets goes back to the record label, and then it gets distributed to Drake or whatever. You know what I mean? Like, there's that argument, right? But then you get into, well, how much? 80%, 90%, 95%, or maybe it's 50%, because at the end of the day, still the input includes the prompt. The input includes the way the idea that someone had to infuse some the voice of Drake to this one beat. Maybe they created the beat, maybe they didn't create the beat, but maybe they did create the beat and then they just put Drake on top of it. How much percentage would that be? You know what I mean? Like, there's so many levels to this. I think the input is very similar to when we're talking about the music industry, it's very similar to the way that producers work. You know what I mean? Someone like DJ Khaled, which a lot of people, to be fair, not a lot of people enjoy DJ Khaled even as a person. But as a music producer, even, what the guy does is he essentially has prompts in his head. He's like, I imagine a beat like this with Drake and Chance the Rapper and Justin Bieber, and that's what I imagine, and it's gonna be a hit. And sometimes it was a hit. You know what I mean? Like, and he got, I'm sure, some type of percentage from that, right? Because he imagined a sort of project, right? And then he put it together. And we don't have a problem with that because it's all human beings, right? But the AI, the relationship that a human being has with an AI and a prompt and everything is the same process. If I go into ChatGPT and I say, I want kind of this and this and this, and I want you to include this and this, and I want this, I want A, B, and C, and then put Z in there too, you know what I mean? And I want this. My prompt is an original prompt, in the same way that, someone's work would be original if it comes from a human being, hopefully. It's a human being, right? You can't, unless I'm obviously plagiarizing, I don't know, the plot of Once Upon a Time in Hollywood or something, you know what I mean, by Quentin Tarantino. But like, for the most part, right, it's like, oh, it's a human being, it's original. And then I put it into ChatGPT, and then ChatGPT creates an original thing. It is original, mind you. It is original, even though it fucking gathered from millions and billions of places and then it used my thing to formulate something unique. That is no different than what a human being does. That is no different, you know? The question is, what do you do with the output? How do you commercialize it? Will you commercialize it? Can you commercialize it? How close is it to something that truly exists now? And if it's not close to anything that exists now, why not use it? You know? That's the thing. That's the thing right there. And Elon Musk, he replied to this on this thing and said, here, let's just look at the comments here. Interesting. Literally, Elon Musk said interesting. It is interesting. It's a philosophical perspective, I think, that people just don't think about, just how close we are to AI. I mean, it truly is like the you know, the God created us in his own image, that type of thing. And real quick, I just want to add this. There's always, you know, that other argument that people will make. Well, then, you know, if you go into this AI rabbit hole, then you are diminishing. The more you go into this thing, the more you're diminishing the human experience, you know, at its purest form. You know what I mean? Like, you're devaluing it. You're diminishing the human influence, you know? I imagine, right? I mean, like, imagine a human being doing a project with ChatGPT. The humanness, you know, you could say to a certain extent, is being heavily diminished, you know, because now it's this piece of technology that is helping you. You know, you could even say it's helping you 50%, you know what I mean? Like, and that's a fair point, you know, but at the same time, and this is my whole, I think, point of it is that it's like, it only highlights the hypocrisy of human beings, because how far are we going to go with that? You know what I mean? Like, at the end of the day, your argument, if you are going to say that, your argument at the core of it is you're defending and you're trying to put a fence around the purity of humanity. You know, you're basically saying humans are better than machines. Humans are superior to machines. Humans should be the only ones, should reign supreme over the machine always. And humans are the center of the universe. That is what you're saying. That is what you were saying. And then at that point, it's like, well, how far do we go with this? You know what I mean? Like, should we have never, ever meddled with technology? Should the Industrial Revolution have never happened? Should we never have invented goddamn pianos? Should we never have invented flutes? Should we have just basically lived in tribes, you know? Should we just never evolved, you know what I mean? And just completely lived. Should there never have been architecture? Should we always just have lived in the wilderness and, you know, on campfires and things like that, and just not worn clothes? Should we just, like, how far do we go with this? You know what I mean? Like how evolved are we allowed to be? How you know, how much technology are we allowed to use in our lives? You know, books to a certain extent was technology. You know what I mean? Like, just because it's not, you know, with a computer doesn't mean it's not technology. You know, it was still an invention. It was still, you know, something that came out of human ingenuity and human discovery and human advancement. You know, it's a product of our evolution. You know, should we have just stopped there and just lived as primitive beings for eternity? You know what I mean? Just to conserve and to stay in the purity of humanity. You know what I mean? Like, how far do we go with this? Should we never have had auto-tune? Should we never have had electronic music? Should we never have had film? Should we have stayed just in photography? Should we just have had silent film? You know, should we have stopped adding audio? And, you know, I'm sure I've made this argument before, but oh my God, like, I'm sure that when audio and film came around, the silent film purists were like, no, this is, you don't understand. Like, silent films are so much superior, so superior because it leaves more ambiguity and it leaves more to the viewer. It's less spoon-feedy to the viewer. Therefore, silent films are superior, and that's why sound should not exist in film. You know, I'm sure there was some dude out there who thought like that, some purist, some elitist. How far do we go with this? And if you are not willing to go the mile, then in many ways you're being a hypocrite. You know what I mean? Like, and you could admit that you're being a hypocrite, or you could just be like, well, no, I mean, I think there are some levels where there's a good balance, and I think AI is crossing the boundary. You could say that too, and that's a fine argument, but let's just be aware that there is such a thing as hypocrisy in this case, and we care so much about humanity. We care so much about being the center of the goddamn universe, right? Anyways, back to the video. Now, of course, there's also a whole other thing that you can get into of like, oh my God, well, is it going to steal is it going to steal artists' jobs? Is it, and the whole thing about disclaiming the use of AI is interesting because, I mean, to what level do we do this? You know what I mean? Like, how pure, does art have to be? You know what I mean? Like, do you need a disclaimer on every single electronic album that says this album was not made with analog instruments? Is that what you need? Do you need a disclaimer on every single movie that says this movie was shot digitally and not with film? In fact, we're seeing the opposite with films now, where films are proudly displaying this film was shot with 35 millimeter film. This film was shot with IMAX cameras. It's like, I think in many ways, the emergence of AI has given a new market to physical things, to analog things, to the human touch. You know what I mean? If anything, AI has buffed, the human experience and the humanness and the vintageness of things, right? You know what I mean? Like, it's weird, but it's like, I don't know, does every mathematical study have to have a disclaimer that says no calculators were used in the research of in this study or whatever, like in this report or whatever, you know what I mean? Like, it's dumb, you know what I mean? Like, it truly is. But, to some people would say, no, it's important to say that right now because we're living in this world where AI is sort of unregulated and it's kind of, it's kind of this nebulous thing, and so being, transparent is very important. And, I can certainly understand that argument. So, it's a very interesting conversation. I kind of went off on a shit ton of tangents, but hopefully it made some sense. I really needed to expel my thoughts on this. But, who cares what I think at the end of the day? James Cameron is far more important than I am. Let me know in the comment section below what you have to say. If you agree with me, if you disagree with me, give this video a like if you liked it, dislike it if you didn't. Share with your AI interested friends, if you will, AI skeptics, whatever. If it's your birthday, happy birthday to you, you beautiful creature. But I think that's it for me. You all take care, stay safe, and until next time, subscribe. That's right, do that, and I love you.